Bucky and Mary Lanehart. We were spending a little time with them between Rochester and Syracuse in the little burg of Clyde. They've got a cool little cafe there. And met Bucky back in 2004 doing some fun work at Savannah Dew, which is a private wildlife refuge with some beautiful buildings, a great big lodge, and all kinds of cool stuff. That place is up for sale now, by the way. If you got $65 million, you can buy it. So anyway, I thought today I'd talk about a number of things. Had a really interesting conversation with a father and son today, and they had a bunch of interesting questions. So we'll see what's going on here. I got the live feed up so I can see hopefully who's watching. I see, looks like Jennifer Ardoin and Tim Stewart. I know they're up, but the number here says 6. Matt Hines is on board. Hello, Tim Stewart. I'm sure you're you're going to haul some bees to California. So I don't know if you got to do that and you're back in Florida or what you did, but good to see you checking in. Anyway, spend a little time today on the phone with some folks. There's Ron Ardoin. Good to see you, Ron. But can't wait to officially meet you. I feel like we've been brothers for a long time now. Ron's going to come to the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology coming up in April. And Tim went to it. So it's really going to be exciting to do that. We've got room for a few more people. If you'd like to come, I see Fred Bingaman checking in. Jason Nipstad. Well, we were in upstate New York for the last few days. And good gosh, we got there. It was like 50 degrees. And that night, a front blew across. Actually, we got in front of that big rainstorm that swept the entire nation. And they got 8 inches of snow over the next 3 or 4 days. Every time I go somewhere with my wife, it seems like it snows on us. As Tim's driving across the country, we'll keep at least one hand on the wheel, buddy. Aaron Schulte, good to see you, Aaron. How's everything going? Hope you got your project going down there in Southeast Texas good. Anyway, we when we left, it was 14 degrees, which was up from 0. John Funk, looks like he's sharing this video. By the way, most of you longtime viewers know this, but here's what I'd like you to do. Click like. Write hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section and share it to your timeline. If you can do that, then we can help more people we get a bigger audience and we can help more people with their ponds and lakes. Looks like Bridget West and Jacob West. I know they know each other. Ron says, can't wait to teach you the pronunciation. Hey, dude, I can't wait for you to teach me the pronunciation of Ardoin. I don't know, man. Yeah, Tim Stewart says it was 35 this morning in Okeechobee. It was really funny because our weatherman was making fun of Florida weathermen because there was a warning for falling lizards or something. So when I can't think of the dadgum name of the lizards, you guys know what it is, but a big cool looking lizard, when it gets to a certain temperature, it can't cling to the trees and they fall down on your head. There's Harrison Davis checking in. Harrison, your story. Harrison, I'll teach Harrison Davis something here. You don't send the pond boss an email saying, hey, what do you think about, why don't you write a story about this topic? Because what I did was I put it right back onto Harrison, and he wrote the story. So in the next issue of Pond Boss, Harrison Davis is going to have a story. I see Danny Mack, Tom Davis, Jimmy Brune. Ponds were cold today in Dallas. Yes, they were, Jimmy Brune. Iguanas. Thank you, Fred Bingaman. Iguanas. They had a falling iguana warning there in Florida today because it got so cold. Let's see what else we got. Yep. Aaron's getting low water. Oh, good. You know what? With as much rain as you've had, you probably ought to be getting some water in that pond down there. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, John Krause chiming in. Falling iguana alert. We get frost alerts. We get freeze warnings. There was a falling iguana warning in Florida. That's pretty funny. If you guys have questions, pitch them at me. I'll be happy to take a shot at answering them if I can. I thought I'd share a conversation that I had today. There's a father and son from the city. They're from Dallas. There's Mike Cottrell. Good to see you, Mike. They're from the city, and they bought some property in the country. Now, these guys, father's probably, late 50s. Son's in college. Son is just beginning to recognize he's got a passion for fishing. Well, a piece of property came up for sale near Denton, Texas, near the little town of Aubrey, actually, kind of northeast of Denton a little bit. And it's got 2 ponds that we used to manage a long time ago. Matter of fact, I probably started managing those ponds in 1986 or 87 and managed them up until probably 2005. And about that time, the owners got a little older. They quit going so much, and they decided they didn't really want to manage the ponds anymore because they just didn't, when you get in your 80s, I guess it's kind of time to tone a few things down. So they toned that down, and they quit going. So that farm kind of laid fallow probably for the last 10 years plus. Hey, Nick, hope those donuts were good. Yeah, we're back home from the snowy north. I know Buck got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to go cook your donuts. It's pretty funny. Hello, Jack Hamilton. Tim, I see you got orange crystal structures forming on the bottom of the cinder blocks in your pond. I think it's iron buildup. Yeah, that's plausible. Sure could, because especially if when you've got water percolating through sand, and if it makes any contact at all with any subsoils that have iron in it, it's going to absorb that iron. And when you've got concrete blocks, you're going to get orange crystal formation. It's probably going to be slimy, but that is flocculation of iron via iron oxide. There's Willie Howe, my neighbor. Good to see Willie checking in. So anyway, this father and son bought, their family bought this property. There's 2 ponds on it. One's about 3 acres, one's about 1.5 acres. And what they decided they wanted to do was just take them and kind of pick up where the other owners left off. Well, it's been 10 years, so it's kind of hard to pick up where somebody left off. And they know absolutely nothing about it. So their learning curve has been really, really steep. It's like they're babes at it. And it's fun to talk about it and answer their questions where their knowledge level is pretty much at the grassroots, And so we started off by talking about what their goals are, and we started digging around into that topic. They want to grow a few big bass, but what they really want to do is to figure out how they can bring those ponds back to their former glory and have them to where they're healthy. That's where they want to start. And I'm going to say that's a real, real good starting point. And there's Steve Lewis checking in, biologist, fisheries guy from Arkansas, Hot Springs. Danny Mack, man, I've got there. Glad you got here too. It says the show looks stuck. I don't know why. I don't know, because our internet seems like it's moving pretty fast. I haven't seen it. I'm looking at the feed on my laptop. Doesn't look like it's stuck. So anyway, I'm going to keep going with this topic till you guys start pitching a few questions at me. But one of the questions, we went and analyzed the lake. We electrofished it back in the fall. And about 60 to 80% of each pond was covered with coontail vegetation. Roger B. Peterson Jr., I can definitely relate to the new pond owners. Okay, well, you're going to like this, what I'm going to share here. So what I told him was start with your goals. Then we came in and analyzed each pond. One's about 1.5 acres, the other one's about 3 acres. Bill Russell from Lower Alabama, L.A. And so we electrofished it, and we found crowded bass, adult bluegills, young of the year bluegills from the fall spawn. There's a clue. And there were thousands of those bluegills, but you also got to understand that 60 to 80% of each pond was covered with coontail. Now, coontail is a vegetation that's not rooted, so it can migrate through the water. It can move around with wind and waves and current. Most macrophytic plants are stuck in the ground because they're rooted and they grow where they are, but coontail's not that way. And coontail will typically grow in the top 3 to 5 feet of the water column. And in fact, that's what they had there. Now, we shocked it. The day we shocked it, the coontail had begun to sink a little bit in the fall, which is what it does. So as we ran across the top of that coontail, there were literally thousands and thousands of little bitty 3/4 inch to 1 inch bluegills. We saw a handful of 3 to 3.5 inch bluegills, but not many. And bass relative weights were anywhere from 80 to 90 to 92% relative weights. What that means is the bass were underweight. Hello, Morgan Tyler. I'm glad you and your daughter, you know what? I'm so proud you're getting your daughter outside. You know, I'm kind of a lurker on Facebook, watching what a lot of you guys do. And man, every time I see you and that baby girl of yours out in the woods, you guys are doing what you're doing, it brings a big smile across my face. Glad you're tuning in. Morgan works for Purina Mills. He works on the wildlife side, which means he also helps with fish food. There's Dave Terry. Now listen, folks, Dave Terry is another stud. He works with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, but he is a mover and a shaker. He's on the Texas Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame Committee. He helps put together a huge tournament, bass fishing tournament in Texas. Each year, it's a fundraiser, as well as one of the biggest tournaments in the state of Texas, where all the iconic anglers come together and fish. It used to be called the Toyota Texas Bass Fishing Tournament. Dave, I'll tell you what, while you're looking, why don't you write down the links where people, if they want to check out this tournament, they can, and talk about it just a little bit. Let's see here, and Stephen Carroll's checking in. Katie Ferrari Baca for all those daughters out there. Okay, looks like we got a link to something. I love that. Go. Go, go, go. Sweet. So anyway, I'm talking to this father-son. We analyzed the lake, and when you see thousands and thousands of little bluegills, you kind of expect that that's a good enough food chain. But the secret was, or the clue was, we really only saw one size class of young bluegills, where in that part of Texas, bluegill are going to spawn 4 to 5 times a year. So when we saw 3/4 inch to 1 inch bluegills in the middle of November, just before Thanksgiving, that tells us that most of the bluegill are getting eaten. It also tells me that the coontail grows exceptionally quick, probably starting about July, and consumes a bunch of that pond. So as I'm talking to these guys, they're asking me some questions. They're saying, okay, now somebody told us we need to fertilize. Do you think we should fertilize? And I said, you know what we're going to do, guys, is we need to let the winter pass, because we don't know if we're going to have any really cold weather or not. If the water gets cold enough and kills some of those aquatic plants, they will begin to decompose, and when they do, their nutrients are going to be released into the water. And if those nutrients are released into the water, there's a good chance that plankton will pick up those nutrients and they'll get a bloom in the water. But if we have a milder winter and we go in about the 1st of March and start checking across each pond and we're picking up sprigs of coontail, then I think fertilization would be a good idea. Because if we get a good plankton bloom on each one of those ponds and it doesn't flush with rainfall, then what we can do is have a really good shot at blocking the sunlight off of that remaining coontail, and maybe with a preemptive strike like that, prevent growth of that coontail. It got invasive. Now, we don't mind if there's some coontail, except coontail is invasive. At some point, it's going to take your pond over if you have that species. But if you don't have any plants and all you got is coontail, it's okay to have a little bit of that. So the question they were asking is we also gave them a goal for each pond as to how many fish they should harvest. And they need to weigh and measure each fish. So they're doing that. Now they've harvested 8 fish that weigh 13 pounds. Average relative weight was 82%. That's good. Because the fish at 82% of its body weight, what it should be compared to what it should be, that fish is not going to regain that weight. And even if it can, its maximum potential, its growth potential is now pretty well exhausted because it lost a bunch of weight and has to spend time, energy, and effort to regain that weight. And you can't make up for lost time with fish. There it is. There it is. The 2020 Toyota Bassmaster Texas Fest benefiting. There you go. You guys click on that. Wait till after the show. Or heck, I don't care. Do it now. But Dave Terry is a mover and a shaker for that tournament. And if you have the chance to come to that, you really should. It's well worth it. There's Michael Gray checking in from Nashville, Tennessee. Let's see here. I'm going to take a pause and see Harrison Davis asking some questions here. We'll back up a little bit. Katie, I'll check out your fish like a cat. I like that idea. Let's see. Roger B. Peterson, my pond's 18 deep in the deepest part. How deep should I place a diffuser? Roger B., remind me where you are, but I'm going to tell you this. I think every pond should have thermal refuge, which means I firmly believe that God put a thermocline in every pond on purpose. Now, I am absolutely not opposed to pushing that thermocline down. I think that's smart because that way, even when a pond turns over, you're going to minimize the risk of losing fish. So at 18 feet, if you can have your diffuser set at about 12 feet, I think that'd be a good idea. At what WRR bass? Well, okay, I think I know what that question is. He's asking, let's do it this way. A 10-inch bass should weigh 10 ounces. A 12-inch bass should weigh 12 ounces. 14-inch bass should weigh 1 pound, 7 ounces. A 16-inch bass should weigh 2 1/4. An 18-inch bass should weigh 3 1/4. If you take those weights and lengths that I just gave you and plot them, you're going to see a curve like that. Fish that weigh less than that at that length, their relative weights are below 100. So now all relative weight is a measure of the average weight of a given length of bass or any species of fish. That is the relative weight for that fish. Now, that's the average weight of that fish. However, normal is 5% on either side of that line. So in the springtime, after the girls have spawned, they're going to be lighter than they were a month earlier, which means their relative weight a month earlier might be 130% of normal. Well, that's normal. So as long as they're within about 5% of that curve, that's considered fine. That's considered normal. But if they're way under that, if they're like 90, 85, 82, it's way too light for those fish to be. Officially stunned and not growing all. Okay, what relative weight are officially or bass? Or you know what? I'm going to tell you this, Harrison. If bass are under 90%, odds are they've taken a long time to get that way. A long time meaning several months, up to several years, to be that small. So there we go. You're welcome there, Dave Terry. Dave Terry's a stud, man. I'm telling you. You guys check that out. All right, Roger B's in Missouri, so let me circle back to that question. Okay, you know what? That gummit, that throat's still choking me. All right, Roger B, I think you need to put your diffuser at about 12 to 14 feet deep. I would not go any deeper than that. Now, the aeration folks had a really good talk with one of the biologists at Vertex Water Features. And just even within the last year, there's some outstanding data being collected. And over the next few months and couple of years or so, that data is going to be shared with all of us. And going to be finding out some things that they're learning by aeration strategies. You know, up until just 4 or 5 years ago, I thought you could put an aeration system in a pond, get the water temperature autonomous, oxygen autonomous for the entire water column, you've hit a home run. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that God put a thermocline in there on purpose. I believe that thermocline gives the fish a thermal refuge. One thing we figured out, I really didn't know this until just 5 or 10 years ago, is a largemouth bass, for example, would much rather have a more ideal body temperature than maximum oxygen. As long as a bass has enough oxygen that it doesn't suffocate, it's going to seek a better temperature, which means they'll get down in the thermocline. Hey, Bruce Condello, good to see you, buddy. Mike DeMint checking in from Tennessee. Frank James checking in. So anyway, talking to this father and son today, they want to know about aquatic plants. So what do we do with it? And is it something we should do ourselves? So here's what I told them. I'm not opposed to a landowner managing their own aquatic plants. What I am opposed to is somebody not knowing what they're doing. Because you can go in with good intentions and completely destroy a fishery. You can go in and let's say you got 80% coontail, and you figured out that you can go buy some Aquathol over the counter, or you've got a private applicator's license. You can go buy it from a wholesaler, and you can follow the label, do exactly what it tells you, and achieve success. You can go out, you can kill all that coontail, you can do it in one shot. But what you don't know, that you don't know, think about that a minute. What you don't know, that you don't know, is what are the consequences of doing that. Let's say that they had gone in and this father and son, let's say they'd gone in and had looked in September, couldn't fish, called somebody that said, yeah, you can knock out that coontail. Just go buy you some Aquathol and kill it. And so they do that in September, and they figure out, they read the label, and the label says use this many parts per million. They even go out and figure out the volume of water they've got, so they can figure out how much Aquathol they need to kill it. And they go and kill it. Then what? So if they were to go out and kill, hey Toronto Madonna, good to see you, dear. So if they go out and they take out all that coontail at once in September, all that decaying, dying, rotting vegetation is going to consume a gigantic amount of oxygen, and they've increased their odds of having a fish kill. And they could kill every fish in both ponds if they did that. Or let's say they're a little smarter than that, because maybe they've learned a little bit of what they don't know, and they decide that they want to come in and take out a third of it. Well, they come in and they use the proper methods, and they go in and they kill a third of that plant life, not knowing that they're going to have drift. It's probably going to kill 2/3 of that. So now they've released all those bait fish on top of a stunted bass population. So now what they've done is they don't know that their bass are stunted. They know they're skinny, but they think, well, they're skinny, and if they have more to eat, they're going to grow better. So they come in and they take out 2/3 of those plants, which takes away all the hiding places for that population of baby bluegills that are maybe that long, which would have been a midsummer spawn. They're going to eliminate their fall spawn, and all those bait fish released at one time. It takes 10 pounds of bait fish for a bass to gain 1 pound. So if they release all those bait fish at one time into a stunted bass population, the bass are going to devour all those fish. They're going to gain a little bit of weight. But now you've got a stunted bass population that's overeaten their food chain again, gained a little weight, and instead of being 12 inches long and underweight, they're going to end up being 13 or 14 inches long and underweight. So a combined system of methods of dealing with the aquatic plants, dealing with their water chemistry, dealing with the fertility, harvesting some fish, some bass, as well as supplementally stocking some more adult bass. Because remember, that pond hadn't been managed in 10 years. They had a bunch of bluegill like that, 7 to 9 inches long, 0 bluegill all the way down to about 3 inches long. So they don't have a junior varsity. They didn't even have a freshman team of bluegill coming up the food chain. Bluegill live how long? Come on, talk to me. Yep, that's right. 6 to 8 years is a typical lifespan of a bluegill. So these bluegill, if you want to think about this pond, these two ponds that have been lying pretty much fallow for 10 years, if those bluegill are 6 to 8 years old, that means they were hatched from bluegill that had been well managed 3 or 4 years after they stopped managing the lake. So these bluegill have to be 6, 7, and 8 years old. So they're about at the end of their lifespan. So we really need to preserve some of these bluegills. And in this case, the landowner says, you know what, why don't we go ahead and stock some? Let's bring in some that are 4 to 8 inches long, that are young, and let's go in and replace those fish that didn't get a chance to make it over the last few years and replace that missing size class. So that's what we did. Dan Drollop, are these bass lengths and weights the same for smallmouth? No, they're a little bit different for smallmouth. They're very, very similar, but if you will Google relative weights for that species of fish, you'll find it pretty easy. There's Todd Austin checking in. Todd knows the deal. You guys remember, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like, share this to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. There it is. Take a look at that. Pond Boss hat. Yeah, it's a pretty good one. And a Pond Boss mug. That thing knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. I don't know how it knows it, but it does. If you haven't gotten this issue, if you haven't gotten this issue of Pond Boss, you need to. This January, February issue, I try to be humble, but I can't tell you how proud I am of this issue because of the content. We've got the best content that I can remember in a long, long time in this issue of the magazine. Now, I'm working on the March, April right now, and we're going to have some pretty good content in that one too. But this one is astonishingly good. If you'd like to see a copy of it, send us an email, subscribe. You know, my little catchphrase on this show is it's $35 a year. $35 a year. And you will get some nuggets out of each issue that will help you. I promise you will. $35. I took Debbie to lunch today, $42. That lunch is gone. This lasts a year, $35. So David White, I live in a brand new community in Southwest Florida. There is a strip pit in the community, and it's about 900 acres. Oh, it scrolled down. Let me look at it. They are and have been trying for a couple of years to get rid of all the hydrilla in the lake. What can I suggest to the HOA to save the integrity of the fishing in the lake? Well, first thing I want to tell you, Tim Stewart says he hasn't gotten the January, February issue. I don't know why I've gotten 4 or 5 calls that folks have not gotten the January, February issue, and I don't know why. It was mailed on December 27th, and we probably had 5 calls or 5 notes from people that haven't gotten it yet. And I'm going to get with Leanne, and she's going to give a call to the printer in the mail house and see if something happened, if there's a glitch. Trey Lillick, back from Iola. Is that Iola, Texas? I don't know where that is. So going back to, let's see here. Going back to David White's question. You know, of all the states in the nation, Florida is probably the most advanced when it comes to dealing with aquatic plants. And it used to be the Lake Doctor. I think Solitude Lake Management Company has bought them out. I think that the lake needs to be studied a little bit so you can make the best decisions. But what I am going to tell you is if you don't get rid of the hydrilla will completely inundate the lake and cover it 100%. And when that happens, fish kill is imminent. Fish growth is arrested. Once any kind of plant consumes about 60 to 70% of a lake, it affects the growth rates of your fish. And it affects the health of the lake. It affects oxygen volumes. It affects the way the lake respires and photosynthesizes. pH can go up and down. The water's no longer happy. So I think you need to get a lake management consultant out there and talk to them about coming up with a game plan on how to manage that hydrilla. Now, be sure it's hydrilla. Folks, I'm going to tell you, when it comes to aquatic plants, the number one problem that I see is people don't identify the plant right. Now, I'm assuming that it is hydrilla, and if it is, you better get on it, and you better get on it now, because next week's too late. But I would bring in a pro that could convince the HOA. Bring in an expert. If you're bringing an expert, the HOA is going to be more likely to listen to them than they are to listening to you, because you live there and you pay dues. But you bring somebody in from at least 30 miles away or farther, it's an expert, they're going to listen to him or her. Let me see here. I'm going to scroll down because I'm missing a few comments. I do. If it is hydrilla, it needs to go away and be replaced with something that you like. See what Frank James says. Look at there. There's Brian Lawrence. Check in hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Good. Decades ago, I remember a lot of excitement about a cross between a large and smallmouth bass, sometimes nicknamed the mean-mouth bass. Obviously, it didn't pan out because you never see it around these days. You know what happened? Yes, it's not a commercially viable species. Most of the time, those are experimental things happening at a hatchery because those fish will not spawn. They will not cross in nature. Well, you know what? They kind of will. There's times that they will, but you don't ever see them in nature in any big numbers. So most of those are hatchery crosses where you bring in a female smallmouth that's ripe and a male largemouth that's ripe. You strip the eggs from the female. Long drawn out process. But I tell you, here's something you need to know about fish farms. Fish farms and fish hatcheries are going to grow what they can sell to make the most profit. That's the bottom line. If that's bluegills, because they can raise 50,000 in a half-acre pond, compared to raising 500 mean-mouths, they're going to raise the bluegills. So there's either not an extensive enough market or producing those fish compared to other species doesn't make economic sense. And even though we might enjoy it, if it doesn't make economic sense, nobody's going to do it. There's mean mouths and Ray Roberts. Well, Katie, if there's mean mouths and Ray Roberts, odds are high that somebody put them there. Because I can't imagine very many small... You know what, though? Let me think about that. I have not read that and not heard that. But if there's mean mouths in Ray Roberts, which is a lake not far from where I live, then it could be... What could make that likely is a ripe female smallmouth ready to go without a willing male smallmouth in the neighborhood. Because smallmouth bass, if they're in Lake Ray Roberts, they're not going to be there in big numbers at all. All right, let's see. Frank James, get Pond Boss Magazine. You'll thank me later. Yes, and I'll thank you now. All right, let's scroll down here. Trey Lillick got his weeks ago. Ron got his today. You missed a few questions up top. Oh, okay. Let me scroll back up top and let me see what's up there. I'm going to scroll back up top and see what's up here. Let's see here. Holy cow. Huh. I'm looking. Well, it's not letting me scroll down very easy. Mark Dyer, looks good and not stuck here. Okay, good. Ron says, is there any use to put structure in 12 feet of water in a pond with no aeration, knowing there's little oxygen below the thermocline at 7 or 8 inches or feet? No, there's not. There's no reason to put structure in water that deep. Now, the only time what I'm not saying is here's what I will say. Fish will use it in the wintertime. But the majority of the structure needs to be maybe just a foot below the thermocline, all the way toward the top in that top layer of water in unaerated ponds. Now, if you got a pond that's 10 feet deep, you can pretty well bet the thermocline is going to end up about halfway down, so it'll be about 5 feet deep. So the majority of your structure should be in 6 feet deep or less. If you got any down deep, not going to be relevant. Let's see, Tim Stewart said, how deep should I dig the addition to my pond? Should excavated ponds be 10 feet deep, 12? You know, it depends on the volume of water that you have to fill them. You know, Tim, in your case, digging deeper, you're going to dig down into the water table. So you're not counting on runoff, you're counting on the water table. So deeper, probably, I'm going to say where you're excavating a pond where the water table keeps it full, 12 to 15 feet deep is plenty deep. Plenty deep. All right, let's see here. Stephen Carroll's from Central Arkansas. All right, those questions did scroll by. Thanks for telling me so I can go back and check it out. All right, I'm scrolling down now looking here because I know we got more stuff. Jacob West, I have not received the January-February edition either. I'll shoot an email off tomorrow. Love this show. Hey, we love you. Jacob was at the last Institute of Higher Pondology. We enjoyed the heck out of him. And I don't know why people aren't getting their magazines. That's something we're going to have to talk to Leanne, let her investigate. I'll talk to her about it tomorrow because I've gotten several emails and messages today, actually. Kevin Briggs. Good to see you, Kevin. Checking in from North Carolina. Mark Cornwell. Hey, Mark. Debbie and I spent a few days up with Bucky and Mary, and we got to enjoy some of that 0-degree weather and 8 inches of snow. Jacob West, how do you think the cold weather is affecting small waters in Florida? I think they're going to be, well, I'll tell you this. The fish that are native are just going to hunker down a little bit. They're going to move into deeper water. But the fish that aren't native, like peacock bass, some of the gobies, some of the armored catfish, walking catfish, some of those exotic species that live down there in southern Florida, they're not going to like it. Now, the good news is that water temperature is probably not going to drop deep enough or low enough to affect all the rest of the fish, but it's not going to drop long enough to kill the fish that they might want to not be there, like those exotic species. So I think they're going to hunker down, and when the weather warms back up in 2 days, they're going to come right back up and get active. Chris Horsley, there's a type of minnow that's sold at a marina at Lake of the Pines in Jefferson. They call them rosy reds. Is this something I should stock besides fathead minnows? Rosy reds are fathead minnows. Rosy reds, this is a cool story. You guys are going to like this. Hey, Mark, yeah, when we landed in Rochester the other day, it was, I think, 55 degrees, and the temperature was going down because that front was coming, and it was kind of rainy. And by the time we got back to Bucky's house, it was probably 26 degrees and snowing like crazy. And they got, over about 2 days, they got 8 inches of snow. And yesterday morning before we left, it was 0. And when we hit the airport, it was about 14. Yep. Okay, so Chris, rosy reds, here, this is a cool story. There was a, gosh, I have to sit here and think about it. It'll come to me probably after the show, but there was a guy in southwestern Arkansas that raised goldfish, and he sold them wholesale to places like Walmart, pet stores, and he would sell literally hundreds of thousands of goldfish by the pound, either for feeder goldfish to feed to cichlids or for people that just wanted to buy goldfish. And he had a fathead minnow pond, and he noticed a few albino fathead minnows. So he collected those fathead minnows and saved them, started to spawn them. Some of them bred true, some of them didn't. So over about 4 or 5 generations of those fathead minnows, he was able to breed true those albino minnows. And it took him about 4 years to get enough mass of those that he had a crop that he could sell. So he started selling them as rosy red fathead minnows. Well, a bunch of the other farmers throughout Arkansas in the Delta region and all the way coming back toward Little Rock loved it. So they started buying some from him, and they started producing them, and they started selling them in the bait stores because they're outstanding crappie bait. The problem with them in pond management is they're so visible, they get picked off. They get picked off by fish. They get picked off by birds, but they are fathead minnows. They're just pure albino fathead minnows. That's a pretty cool story. So let's see. Zach Cook, I have a 3/4 acre pond, maximum depth 10 feet. I have no aquatic plants. Should I add some? And if so, what type? What I'm going to tell you is that I believe native strains, now listen, I'm going to be real picky about how I tell you this. I believe that native strains or native species of non-invasive underline non-invasive plants are a valuable asset to every recreational sport fishing pond. I think aquatic plants are a huge key cog in the ecosystem and in the food chain and in the habitat for fishing ponds. So if you can have some plants, I would do that. Now those, depending on where you are, I'm talking about American pondweed. I'm talking about eelgrass. I'm talking about Illinois pondweed. Maybe even bushy pondweed, depending on how deep your pond gets, how quick. Bushy pondweed can be invasive if you've got too much shallow water. So if your grades are a little bit shallow, going down to that 10 feet, bushy pondweed might not be the best. Now, Zach, in northern Indiana, you've got some other choices. You've got, somebody help me out here, curly leaf pondweed. I think that's a good choice. Curly leaf pondweed has got a fairly short growing season. So it grows up, then quits, and starts to go dormant within about 60 days. What that does is lets that plant outcompete other plants that are a little bit slower growing, and it takes them a little bit longer to catch up, like Illinois pondweed. Illinois pondweed is a great choice in northern Indiana. So I look at that one. Dion Myers checking in. Good to see you. All right, so looks like Chris and Tim are having a good talk. Steelman checked in. Chris Steelman's been doing some really fun waterfowl hunting on his family place in northeast Texas. Mark Cornwell's pond is frozen again solid. Mark's pond was frozen solid, and then they had a kind of a spate of warm days in high wind. They had 2 days where the temperature didn't get much below the mid-50s. And Mark and I had a little conversation last week where he had 6 to 8 inches of ice one morning, the second day of that warm spell. And by the time he got home that night, it was gone. That pond was thawed out. That is stressful on his fish because now the water has a chance for the temperature to plummet much, much, much cooler than it would have had that ice not melted. It'll be kind of interesting to see what your water temperatures are down low, Mark, after you get matter of fact, if you get a chance to get out there off the dock your dock's out of the water, but if you get a chance to get out there, and I'd love to know what the temperature of the water is down deeper. My gut tells me it's going to be 39 or 40, but I'd love to know that. Trevor Carty, pond management business owner in North Carolina. So glad I found this wealth of knowledge. As a relatively new business owner, all this industry knowledge is a huge help. Trevor, you need to come to the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. We got Ron Ardoin. He's going to teach me how to say his name. I probably should call him and ask him, but I've never done that. From Louisiana, we got a pond, and he's got a pond management business. He's going to bring his dad and one of his helpers. We got a guy coming from Jacob West. You're killing me. You just totally distracted me, dude, with that comment. I'll get to it in a minute. And there's a pond management company coming down from Idaho. And I've been talking to a guy in Alabama that's in the pond management business. We got a guy coming from St. Louis, Missouri that works for a pond management company. So if you've got a chance to come and you can do it, check us out. It's the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. I think we've got some information on the Pond Boss website at pondboss.com. It's $1,500, but it's worth it for what you're doing, I'm telling you. Chuck Brinkman, I got my girls interested in designing habitat to drop in before spring. Awful proud of them. Chuck, you are the man, dude. You know what? Here's the good news, is your girls are going to have this stuff figured out. They already do. They got a lot of it going on. But they're going to have to find, when they get bigger and boys start coming into their lives, dude, I know you're going to be cleaning your gun when the boys show up, but they're going to have to find somebody out there that they partner up with at some point as a husband. They better know how to hunt and fish, or those girls are going to leave them behind. Jacob West, how do you impeach crappie in a half-acre pond? I so avoid politics. You get Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, and half of downtown San Francisco and shove them in your pond. That's how you do it. Woo! Boy, that ought to come back to me. Let's see. Mark Cornwell, I'll bring a YSI home. Yeah, do that, Mark. Do that. Check that out. and because I would love, if that ice is thick enough to walk on, I would love to know. I would love to know if that thaw you had for a week, how that influenced the temperatures, because you went from mega cold to way too warm, straight back into the mega cold. And I'd love to see how those water temperatures were impacted, because I honestly don't know. Let's see here. Tim Stewart, ha ha ha, I bet I can kill any fish in any ponds at this point. Yeah, you know what? Yep, Tim Stewart. Tim was blessed with walking catfish, armored catfish, big giant salamanders that are native to that part of the country. Holy cow. Several different species of sunfish. And he drained his pond. He pumped it empty, and the fish wouldn't die. So he started doing some homework. Thought he could kill them with chlorine, with pull shock. Didn't work. So he started figuring out, okay, if I can get those walking catfish, which were wallowing in the mud, and he couldn't get to them, he figured out that if he could make the temperature plummet, he could knock a bunch of them out. So that's what he did. He threw a bunch of ice on them and froze them. That's good stuff. Let's see here. Ron says there's been two... it scrolled up on me here. There's been 2 ponds that I've stocked that have ended up with black crappie, and there's also been a few ponds that have been stocked by other companies that have produced black crappie. Is this something to question the fish hatchery about, or Mother Nature? Question the fish hatchery. It's the good fish hatcheries practice good quality control, but even the best fish hatcheries can make a mistake. Now, here's the typical mistake. When a fish hatchery gets an order for fish, they'll go out and they'll collect those fish. So let's just take a hatchery that raises black crappie, bluegill, red-eared sunfish, and catfish. And they get an order for crappie. They'll go out, they'll collect those crappie, handle them very gingerly, bring them up, put them in concrete tanks, flush them with well water to clean them up, and then let them sit in what they call harden. They put salt on them, which makes their slime dehydrate a little bit, so the stresses of handling are not so devastating. And then they let those fish sit for a couple of days before they let somebody pick them up. Then they'll come pick them up. So if somebody orders 3,000, they might bring up 3,200. So they'll go through that tank and they'll collect all those fish, load them on the truck. But if they don't drain that tank and add new water to it before they go get the next batch of fish and bring them in and put them in that concrete tank, they could end up with 40 or 50 leftover crappie that they're not paying attention to that are in there. But I would look. I tell you what, Ron, your eyes are probably not to the point that you can look at fish and see any difference. I mean, I can look down on a transport tank full of fish, and I can tell you if there's anything wrong. I can tell you if the fish are unhealthy, if they're lethargic, if you see white spots, if you see any red. But I can look down on some fish, and I can usually tell if there's anything in there that shouldn't be there. There are... Now, when you say, I've noticed that there are big bayous near the ponds, if you completely trust your fish farmer, then odds are that those crappie are coming from somewhere else. Now, what's really interesting to me, in the bigger bayous in Louisiana, most of those sac-a-lait are white crappie. So if you end up with black crappie, odds are that those fish came from an outside source at some point. Jason Henry, Tim Stewart is laughing at me. Let's see here. Roger Peterson, doing that would turn my pond into a sewage lagoon. Man, I've already gone by there. Let me go back. I don't know what I said to do that. I'll just have to leave that there. Oops, I'm not sure. I lost you there. Okay, so I'm looking down here, so bear with me a minute. Let's see, Trevor and Jason Nepstad are having a good talk. Jason Nepstad is actually near Fayetteville. Tim Stewart, that didn't up killing them either. Water was coming up from the bottom so that ice didn't freeze them out. Had to raise the pH super high with hydrated lime. There you go. So Tim tried a whole bunch of different things. All right, folks, Pond Boss Magazine, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this video to your timeline. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. I do want to take a minute to thank Purina Mills for helping sponsor this show. Without them, you know, I really appreciate Purina. One of the things I really appreciate about Purina is the fact that they will work with us to develop new feeds, and they continually do that. You know, the latest new introduction is MVP, multivariable particle. There's 9 different particle sizes in that fish food to feed your fish. And if you've got any game fish, especially if you're managing a multiple species fish population, if you got largemouth bass, bluegill, fathead minnows, whatever you got, that MVP is going to work really, really good. Mr. Peterson was referring to you throw some politicians into the pond to impeach the crappie. Woo, I got to stay away from politics. Nobody cares what I think about politics. But you do care what I think about fish, so we'll stay with that. Let's see here. Philip Benefield, I see them, but I think you're not. Okay, I guess I missed that. You got to help me out here. Trevor Carty is based in Statesville, North Carolina. I got some friends in Statesville. Trevor, we ought to talk. Why don't you call the office and leave your phone number or message me and we can have a conversation. I'd like to know more about your pond management company and see how Pond Boss can assist you and vice versa. Well, guys, it's 7:22. Let me go back to the original topic I started with, the father and son. What they're trying to wrap their brains around is what do they need to do to manage their aquatic plants but not eradicate them? What do they need to do to cull some bass, add some younger bass that have better growth potential with better genetics, and beef up the food chain? So that's where their learning curve is. They really don't know. And so what they're learning, trying to grasp and wrap their brain around, is how much plant is enough? How do we manage our food chain? What's the best methods and numbers and sizes of fish to cull? And let's ramp up our food chain so that the fish that we have and the fish that we stock can grow better. And by the way, since we're missing some freshman and junior varsity fish, let's add some. So that's their prongs of attack. And that's a good, healthy way to do it. So I'm pretty happy with those guys. And I'm happy to help them. All right, Heathless, how many pounds of food per acre per year for brim? Brim are going to eat about 3 to 5% of their body weight every day when the water temperature is 55 degrees or warmer. Now, how many pounds of food per acre per year? You know, I'm going to tell you this, Heath. We recommend one feeder for about every 3 acres to 5 acres of pond. And that feeder in 3 to 5 acres is going to feed 50 pounds in about 3 weeks. So if we extrapolate that down a little bit, I'm going to tell you 50 pounds, or how many pounds of feed per acre is going to be probably in a month. You're probably going to feed about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per acre per day for bluegills. Now, if you have other fish, that number is going to go up. You're going to feed more than that. So I'm going to say 1 pound to 2 pounds per acre of feed. Now this is on a medium intensity management plan. If you really want to ramp up your management plan, you're probably going to feed more like 5 to 10 pounds of fish food per day for brim. But nobody does that. You know, so 1 to 2 pounds of fish food per acre per day is going to be about what you should expect to feed. So multiply that out over a year. A year meaning you're going to be feeding those fish from, say, the first week of March until about Thanksgiving. So you're going to have about 9 months. That's 35, 36, 38 weeks. 2 pounds. You're going to feed 40, 80. You're going to feed 2 bags of feed through the course of a year per acre. So Tim Stewart says, I'm thinking about digging an additional pond each year and connecting it to the previous one after a year or two. This way I can cull all the small fish in the other ponds, and my recruitment will be from additional ponds that I connect. Maybe a lot of work, but it could be a cool experiment. Thoughts? Yes. Yeah, I like that. Actually, if you'll look up, golly, I don't know why my brain isn't clicking in on all these names tonight. There's a guy down near Laredo. He's a, oh Lord, it'll come to me in a minute and I'll tell you his name. But what this guy did is he bought like 10,000 acres and he cut it up into 5 different ranches, sold 4 of them, which was enough to pay for his. Then he saved his money and he has water rights to pump water, or actually gravity flow irrigation water, out of the Rio Grande River. And so what he did was he built, saved up his money, hired an operator, rented a piece of machinery, and built about a 20-acre lake, mostly by excavating it. It's fairly flat down there. Then he stocked it. He started managing those fish. And about 3 years later, he'd saved up enough money to do that again. Well, he's done that over a span of time, and he's got now about 100 acres of ponds. And one of his missions is to try to grow the next world record bass. Now, he's been spending a bunch of money on that. But what he did was he took 20 acres, managed the fish, and after about 3 years, his fish were starting to get a little crowded, so he added another 20 acres and didn't stock any more fish. Then he added another 20 acres, then another 20 acres. So in theory, I think that would work really, really, really well. I haven't given a shout out to Texas Hunter. Texas Hunter Feeders have been a partner for a long, long time with Pond Boss Magazine, and we love those guys. They make the best feeders out there. The customer service is outstanding. I know that I can call and order a feeder. Matter of fact, I called them a couple of weeks ago and ordered a feeder for a guy, and I called him at 3:30. He had the feeder the next day. So they are really good at what they do. Well, guys, it's 7:28. I'm about to wrap it up here, and glad to hang out with you again. Had a very interesting day. Went and said goodbye to a longtime friend, high school basketball buddy of mine, growing up in Fort Worth. Godspeed to Rick Close. You died way too young, buddy. We miss you, we love you, and we'll help do what we can with your family now that you're gone. And I know there's a bunch of guys my age thinking about their mortality today, but we did have an outstanding celebration of life for that dear friend. People told stories, we got to laugh, and one thing that happened is it brought us all together, which is kind of a sad state of affairs that you come together at a funeral, but that's what happened, and it was a joyful celebration. And I'm going to tell Rick Godspeed, and all you guys out there, hug your family, love your ponds, catch some fish, feed those fish, and I hope you have the passion that I do, or even if you have half the passion I do, to go out and be the best stewards of the water you can be. Pond Boss, that's who we are, and we help you be better stewards of your land and water. So, until next Wednesday, you guys have a great rest of the week, great weekend. Go tune in to the impeachment hearings. No, don't. Politics suck. So, until next Wednesday, I love you guys. Adios.